Welcome back to the Wellness with Delaney podcast. Today I'm sitting down with Sophie Griot. She is the founder of Drift Creative Co., an amazing company in the media space that I just love following and have been following since the very beginning. And today we're going to chat all about how you can find your purpose in life, how you can find your alignment in life, and do what sets your soul on fire. So many of us are living in this hustle and grind culture where we're actually kind of miserable trying to make ends meet, whether it's in money or in other areas of life, relationships, in lifestyle, bad habits, like all of it. And our goal for you today is to leave with some tools that will help you clear the clutter and discover your dream life and start living it now. So thank you so much, Sophie, for joining.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me on. What a wonderful introduction, too. I'm just so excited to be here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to have you on. So, can you tell us a little bit about the origin story, how you started Drift, like what it is?
Yeah, so I feel like I have a bit of a roundabout way of how I got to where I am. Like I wasn't somebody who knew at a young age what I wanted to do. I had truly no idea. And so I went to school for documentary filmmaking and international affairs. I wanted more than anything to make documentaries about women's education in different areas of the world and kind of just like how it differed from how we view it and just like explore that concept a little bit. And when I graduated, that like obviously didn't happen. I had to get a job that could pay my bills and all the things. And so I ended up getting into a creative agency and a corporate creative agency. And I quickly realized that there was like nothing really creative about a corporate agency. Like it's kind of rinse and repeat. And it was honestly soul crushing for me. I like showing up for work every day. I was like, there's no way I can do this for the rest of my life. And that kind of set me on a journey for ending up here as a photographer and videographer. But I took many pit stops. I was in interior design and real estate and tried my hand at social media management and ultimately just discovered that I really loved film photography and everything kind of took off from there.
Wow, I love that so much. And so what you're doing with Drift, essentially you're working primarily with businesses, correct? Doing like all the different media or like what are the ins and outs of what you do?
Yeah, so I work with brands, primarily women-owned businesses, and help them with their branding essentially. I take photos for their products and then lifestyle photos with their products and really kind of help portray the values and the character of their brand and help convey that to their customers. And I absolutely love it.
It's yeah, you are so passionate about it. And I think anyone can see when they look at your page and what you're doing that you put your heart into it. And I think that's what everyone's looking for these days. So for you, was there a specific point where you woke up and decided like you wanted to be an entrepreneur and start this, or was it a gradual slow build?
It's funny. I was thinking about this today and like the difference, or I feel like there's almost this trait in all entrepreneurs. Like they've worked at a corporate job and they're like, oh, I know I can't do this. And it's kind of like an on off switch. And as soon as I knew that I couldn't do the corporate world, it was on. And I, I feel like it was gradual to get to a place where I owned my own business, but I knew from the very beginning that this would be my end goal, if that makes sense. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I feel like with entrepreneurs, when we discover that, I feel like there's something in our like hearts or our connection to something else that drives us out of that like corporate world almost, and you can never like look back. And that's kind of how I felt.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I actually really resonate with you there. I I think, with my story, I started in the corporate world after college with health coaching and was like, I am not just having Sunday scaries, I am having panic attacks on every Sunday night. Like, I can't do this. I wasn't built for this. I wasn't cut out for this. Versus now, there's something magical when it's Sunday night and you're like so excited for Monday because you're going to start something that you're passionate about that fuels your creative engine, which isn't to say like the corporate world is bad, because there's something for everyone, right? Like, it's one size fits one. That's why we have so many different kinds of careers out there. If everyone did the same thing and was like the same part of the body, nothing would ever get done. But there is, I think, this seed of entrepreneurship, this like creative dog that some people are born with, and they don't even realize that's what's inside of them laying dormant, and they don't feel the satisfaction. So it's like, how do we get people to be aware of that seed in them and help them water it and grow it and step into their own power? So I think, the scary thing for people can be being in the trenches when they start a business. What were some of the biggest struggles when you started Drift?
I think first of all, if you've even started, if you've even tried, that is the biggest, scariest leap, to even just admit to yourself that you want to try and be vulnerable and kind of put your ego aside. So if you're there, if you're in the trenches, that's incredible, first of all. But some of the hardest things for me when I was first starting out was, and I still struggle with to this day, honestly, is the feeling of like imposter syndrome, kind of like, why would someone hire me? Or comparing yourself to other people who are doing really well, and not in a negative way, but just in like, wow, they're so talented, they're so great at their job. um how could I ever compare? And I think the truth of that is, there's if you're just starting out, of course, you're not going to have as much experience. Of course, your portfolio or, your client roster isn't going to look the same as someone who's been doing it for several years. But I think being at the beginning and looking up at someone else, instead of using it as like, oh, I'm never going to get there, use it as a like, oh, since they have that, I know that I can get there eventually.
Yeah. I mean, we tend to look at people's overnight success in quotations, right? And we think it truly is overnight, but they've been in the trenches and they've done the work. And so when we look at people who have what we want, it's often because, with very few exceptions, they've been already where we are now. So it's something to look forward to rather than compare, which I think comparison is so easy now with social media, with everything being super accessible and online, and people really just showing the highlight reels of their life. And I think we can all be, guilty of that. And there are so many pros of that. I love social media in some ways, but it can also be really hard for people who are struggling with that comparison side. And so what tips would you have, like, aside from that, like, do you have any tips for people who are just feeling that imposter syndrome, who don't feel like they're good enough, but want to open a door of one of their goals or dreams?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I think there's always going to be lessons learned. Like, no matter where you are in your journey, you're going to be at the beginning trying to like grow your portfolio. But in 5 years from now, you're going to be encountering problems that are honestly even bigger and like more difficult to tackle in some ways. So, like, there's always going to be ways to learn and grow throughout your entire journey. But if you're dealing with imposter syndrome, I think getting really clear on why you're doing what you're doing, like why you love it, what your goal is, and why it's your goal. I think it's really important to have a goal that's outside of like your ego, outside of like wanting recognition or fame or money or whatever. You have to have something that is bigger than that. So, yeah, you might feel a little out of place, but you know that you're not going to stop working because you have this bigger overarching goal in mind. I think that's really important because there's going to be tons of days that you don't feel like showing up and doing like this, what feels like intensive work or meaningless work but when you have your sights set on something bigger, or a bigger mission, then all of that stuff feels important and impactful, if that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense. Like if your why is not connected to your heart, if it's, I mean, ultimately, yes, you want to drive your economic engine, you want to grow and all these things, but if that's your only why, like it's not that deep. And so I totally get it. You have to love what you do. You have to truly like you have to just be on fire for what you do. And I think you're such a good example of that. So being where you are now, you know, you started the business a couple years ago and you're you've grown so much as far as like the clients you work with, the projects you're working on, and just finding your groove and your style. What are the most surprising aspects of running a business that you experience today?
I honestly feel like the community that I have made and the people that I've met, I think a lot of my life I was interested in things that like other people weren't, or I didn't think other people were interested in, or I always just felt like a little out of the pack because obviously as a creative or as an entrepreneur, like that's not usually the path people take. Maybe more so these days, but like when I was coming out of college, um, it still was a bit strange to like for someone so young to try to go the creative entrepreneur route. And so I think honestly, it's meeting people who reflect the same values as me, that want the same things and work hard. And they see their work as this like passion project as opposed to something that they just clock into every day, which again, like you said, there's no right or wrong to that, but it feels so nice to have a community around me that views life the same way, because it can feel a bit disheartening or like something's almost wrong with you or you're viewing the world in a weird way when the people surrounding you aren't reflecting back how you see the world. Um, so I think that has been honestly the most surprising and impactful part of running a business.
That's beautiful. Yeah, you do kind of become the people around you. So you want to be around people who inspire you, and that can be in any area of life, not pertaining to business only, right? Like whether it could be their business or it could be their outlook, their discipline, their relationships, their finances. Like when we're around people who inspire us, it brings us higher, right? And I think that's so amazing, which kind of also goes into the idea of like that's why we don't need to compete with our community. Like we can cheer each other on because when one person, you know, it was like when the tide rises, we all rise. And that's amazing. So, and I know that for us, I mean, both living in the Pacific Northwest, which can be a very isolating area, especially this time of year in the winter. What are some ways that you've been able to build community, like-minded people and people who level you up?
I think social media has been such a game changer, and like you were saying, it's a blessing and a curse. Like there's so many great things that come from it, and there's also some struggles, but I think using social media as a connection has been so useful, and just talking about what I think sometimes we're a bit nervous to talk about what we're interested in because it feels very vulnerable, and if someone disagrees or makes a comment, it can feel like a direct threat, almost like it hurts. But I've found that it actually draws more people in, the people who you want to have those deeper conversations with. And and then that is kind of like the catalyst for these community events, like gathering people with similar interests into a room and being able to chat, or even not like not similar interests, and being able to learn a new perspective. Um, I think showing up, like getting outside your comfort zone and just showing up for a community event is the way that I have like started to build more of an in-person community, and that is super vital for me, for not only for my business but just for me on a personal level. um but it's hard to find that, especially in Seattle. Like it's not everywhere, you really have to look for it. um But there are places if you look hard enough.
Yeah, it's like intentionality, right? I mean, so many people, I actually think so many people here aren't even like cold or freezy or, the Seattle freeze, whatever. A lot of people are just waiting for someone else to take initiative. And I've noticed that I've lived here for I think 4 years now. And the first 3 years, I don't think I made a single new friend. And it was because I was waiting for other people to reach out. And then around the fourth year, or I guess like after the third year, I was like, you know what? I'm going to start coordinating things. And the way your friend group expands and deepens when you're just like, screw it. I don't care if I look desperate. I don't care if I'm like that person. I'm going to go after the friendships I want. I'm going to be the friend that I would want to have. And it does draw in community. Sometimes you have to just be willing to like swallow your pride and be the person to initiate, even if that means you're putting yourself out there and putting yourself at risk. And it's ultimately worth it because you might get rejected sometimes, but you're also going to find friendships and things that be around the people that you really need in your tribe. So, okay, you touched on the community events, and I've seen a little bit about them. I don't know too much about them. Can you tell the audience about all the cool like community wellness, like content events that you've been doing?
Yeah, so coming up on this year, my goal for 2025 is to be more intentional with these events and host them more, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, Consistently, hoping to host them more consistently. And my idea for this year is I haven't thought of a name for it, but I want it to be like a dream big event where people can come and say out loud the thing that they are chasing, the thing that they're like scared to almost to admit to themselves and say it out loud to a room of people. And then we all work like create a container where people have time and space to like think and dream about the thing they really want the most. And maybe they've been nervous to say it out loud or they're not in the right spaces for like that kind of support, to chase that a dream and or a goal that they have and just be surrounded by people who want to cheer them on and connect them to other creatives or whoever they might need to be connected to. And so my hope with these events is honestly just empowering people to go after the things they love. Like nothing is crazy, nothing is out of your reach. It's all just perception, honestly, and who you are surrounded by. And if you have a community of people who just think you're incredible and talented and deserving of everything you want and dream of, then you can't help but like go after the thing that you want the most?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, I actually just had a friend tell me, like, Delaney, the key to success is just a little bit of illusion. You have to be the one that believes because you're right. Nothing's out of reach. If you perceive that you're going to be in mediocrity for the rest of your life, cool, that's where you are. But if you truly, truly believe, because when you believe, now your actions. So, like, if I believe I'm going to be the best wellness podcaster in the world, and I believe that in my soul, now every action I take in the rest of my days is out of that belief, right? It's not just like a belief and then you're thinking about it and that's it, right? Suddenly your actions shift because you're like, no, I already am this. I'm going to act like it because I am it. And
Yeah.
it changes your life. And I've seen you do that. I mean, you basically were like, I'm trying to, back when we worked together, you were like, okay, I'm going to figure out what my goal is. The second you decided, you're like, I am this. And every day you didn't just act it, you were it. And I think that's something that really inspired me about your journey particularly. So okay, you said saying the goal out loud, saying the dream out loud. What is the impact of stating your goals out loud verbally?
I I feel like, and this is something I think I'm providing something that like honestly I need myself. And I when I talk to other people hear the same thing. It's like all of a sudden it becomes reality. It becomes truth. It becomes like a spoken truth. And now you've planted the seed. And I heard once that when you get ideas in your head, you are meant to have that idea. Like that seed is planted in your head for you because it's ready to like come earth side, like it's ready to be created. And if you don't create it, it's going to get passed on to somebody else, because like it's the story's ready to be told, or like the job is ready to be done. And I like that stuck with me so much. And when I feel really passionate about something, sometimes it feels kind of obscure, but I know I want it, but I get so scared to say it out loud. But as soon as you tell someone else about it, it's like, oh, I can't go back on this now, almost, or like it becomes real, I think.
Yeah, and for people who maybe they don't live in Seattle and they can't make it to your events, maybe they're driving in the car listening to this episode right now, like pause it and say that crazy goal and then get back to us and we'll talk about how to get there. There is that level of like how many ideas float in your head and then go away because or they get shoved to the very back, right? And there's something really powerful in speech. And even, there's obviously so many different spiritual schools of thoughts. For me, like I believe the Bible verse about there being power of life and death in the tongue. When you say something, you're putting it out there spiritually, energetically, like it matters what you say, which is also why
Absolutely.
it's important to speak life into yourself and speak life into your dreams, not death, not self-deprecating, like all of that. Okay, so for some people, I think some people will be listening to this and they might not know what their dream is yet, but they know there's something more for them. Like they're dissatisfied. They know that there's something like that they're reaching for, but they don't know what it is. What would your tips be for people like that who want to discover their purpose and don't know what it is?
First of all, I think having, again, that connection and knowing is the first step. Like knowing that there's something more. I think many people in our society, our culture has conditioned us and trained us to be disconnected from whatever you want to call it, intuition, spirit, God. Like we've been conditioned to disconnect. And everything in our life like kind of leads to that. It's like social media, all the noise, all the distractions try to tell us who we are, what we're supposed to do. So even having that like feeling, that urge that you want more is an incredible sign. Um, and I think this is the hardest thing to do, but really getting quiet and whatever practice it is, whether it's like prayer or meditation or running or exercising, yoga, whatever it might be, like getting really quiet and just tuning in to whatever it is you connect with and sitting with it every day and just letting yourself be still. I think being like stillness, honestly, so much wisdom comes from that, and kind of like tuning back into yourself. Um, I think you'll be surprised like where that leads you and the answers that you get. And and then also on top of that, taking action. Like you can try a million different things, and if something doesn't click, it doesn't mean you did something wrong or you wasted time. It just means you're gathering like information, you're gathering lessons, and then you get to like turn and take that somewhere else to the next idea. Um, I think that's the most important part when you don't know what direction you're supposed to go in, is not just throwing in the towel and feeling defeated when something doesn't work out, because many things are not going to work out. Um, but to look at it as a positive and say, okay, I learned this. I don't love this part. I like this part, and take that with you as you go to the next lesson. Um, but yeah, I think just like really tuning in and listening closely and then taking action on those ideas.
Yeah, I love the stillness component. I mean, especially in America, like Western society in general, we're never still. And when we're still, we have our phones in our hands. So we're still not still. Um, or we're doing, like we're constantly humans doing instead of human being, right? So, and I think this kind of does translate even. So if you're not starting, or if you're just starting your journey, like there's that need for stillness. But even if you're on the path and you're living your dreams, there's going to be so many times where you need to tune in and reconfigure, reevaluate, or just decide the next steps, or just connect with yourself in general. It doesn't even have to relate to like your business, but for you being somebody who is running a business, is an entrepreneur, doing all these things, like how do you make time to maintain stillness in your own life?
This is something that I was kind of forced into last year. I was so burned out. I was like ill. I was losing hair. I was so anxious. Um, and I kind of had a moment of realization where I had like hyped myself up so much or had so much anxiety about my business and life and everything that I kind of had this breaking point and I was like, I literally have no choice. This is my rock bottom for how I'm feeling about myself and just everything around me. And so I made a commitment to myself that my morning was mine and I wasn't going to be responding to emails. I was waking up early, like not drinking, not any like all that was gone out of my life. And I just set aside at least an hour and a half to journal, to work out. I meditate a little bit in the mornings, just like listen to a little music and light some candles and stuff, and just really let myself relax and hear myself out. But for me, it took like honestly a moment where I had to take a really hard look at myself and be like, this is not the life that I want to be living. And what is that life? And even if it feels difficult, like I'm going to do it every day, even if it feels hard. And it's paid off immensely. And it's only been 6 months or something, but um, yeah, it was like a non-negotiable for me.
This might seem counterintuitive to some people. Like when you're conditioned to want to do more and more and more and more, and that's how you succeed. And then sometimes, what you're saying is actually sometimes you need to pull back and spend less time on your business and take some time for you to tune in, to increase that intuition, your physical health, all these things. How has that impacted your business? Having that time for you to tune inward before you tune outward?
Honestly, it makes things very clear. Instead of running around and being like, oh, I have to do it all, I have to do everything. Instead, it's what's the goal? Like, of course, you want to do all of these other things, but you're one person. You can't do all of those things. Maybe someday in time. Um, okay, wait, a few things. First, removing your ego, because the ego is attached to wanting to do all those things. It wants to like prove that it can do all those things. You want to be able to show on social media that you've done all these things. Like it's so removing my ego, detaching that, and then reconnecting to that bigger why, like why I'm doing what I'm doing, what the goal is, and then taking reasonable steps every day to get me to that goal. And it's moved me closer because I'm not going in 500 different directions and doing all these random tasks that like sure are moving me close to all these different goals, but ultimately like I'm closer to the starting line, if that makes sense. But when I have one goal that I'm focusing on and making strides toward every single day, like you're getting closer to the finish line faster. If that makes sense?
Absolutely. Have you read the book Good to Great?
No.
This is what it's reminding me of. For those of you guys listening, I'll link it in the show notes, but I just finished it. And this is essentially what you're saying. Like there's like a Venn diagram, like the 3 circles,
Mhm.
and there's what you can be the best at the world at, what fuels your economic engine, and then what you're passionate about. And what you should be doing is that intersection of the 3 circles. There's going to be a million things in all 3 circles that you could be the best at these things. This could drive your economic engine. You could be passionate about these things, but what is that one little thing right in the center? And oftentimes what keeps us in mediocrity and keeps us stuck is trying to do all these things. But like you're saying, like sometimes you have to take a step back, remove all those things that are cluttering your purpose, cluttering your life, And then you have a clear pathway instead of a 5 million little like jets and forks in the road and things that you need to do that use up your energy. So that's totally tracking. Also, really recommend that book. If you are looking for a business development book, it has been wildly impactful for me personally.
I'm gonna look into that because I mean, I even have to remind myself of that like weekly when I'm making my to-do list. You know, you start writing things down. Oh, this would be great, but does this actually get me from point A to point B? No. So that's like, we'll put it on like a future list, but it doesn't go on this to-do list. Um, but it's so true. Like you get distracted by all these little things, and all of a sudden a month goes by and you're like, what did I even do this month? I can't even track what I did because I was so all over the place. I'm so burned out, and yet I feel like I haven't gotten any closer. Um, and so, yeah, having that like tangible, that one like big tangible goal that you're moving towards and pushing everything else off to the side, um, it feels really hard, but I feel like just, it like, um, the return is a lot bigger going towards one goal than 50.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, you can do one thing great or a million things okay. I'd rather do one
Mhm.
thing great. So, okay. So, with that, I mean, like you're talking about the distractions, and I'd imagine working in social media can be a distraction. So, how do you set boundaries around social media consumption as somebody who works in the industry?
Honestly, I put time limits on my phone, but you can bypass those like so easily. I mean, honestly, oftentimes the thing will pop up and I'll just press like dismiss for the day or something. And that's something I'm really working on for 2025. I got something called the brick, and you cannot get into your social media unless you go like touch it and type the password in. It's just like a pain in the butt to do it. And Drew and I will like hide it from each other sometimes so we can't go unlock like our social media. Um, but also something that has helped me immensely is outsourcing my own social media so that I am not completely consumed by creating it and then like tracking it and all of these things. I It's helped my mental health so much. Like I'm worrying about my client stuff. I don't also want to have to hyperfixate on my stuff as well because it would just tick my hours up so much. I still like respond to DMs, like, and will post stories and stuff, but I try to really limit my time on like consumption and creating and stuff like that. Because it just does like not great things to my head.
Yeah, well, it is a slippery slope. You know, you go on to share something, to post something work related, and next thing you know, you're 500 reels deep, and you're like, "How did I even get to this corner of the internet? Like, I need to get off
So
of this
bad.
now." It's so easy, and like, okay, well, I think this is a universal struggle for a lot of people, not just content creators, but setting boundaries around social media will change your life. I'm still learning how to do that, but I'm definitely going to be Googling that brick when I get off of this because I'm like,
You
maybe
should
that's
look
what
it
I
up.
need.
I'll send you the info. Actually,
Yeah.
it's amazing. My brother recommended it to me. Um, but so I noticed that I did a dopamine cleanse at the beginning of this year, and I just was like noting my triggers, like when I would go reach for my phone, and it's like my brain had tricked me almost, or like conditioned me to think if I was in a conversation with someone and I didn't know a piece of information, I'd go, "Oh, I'll go like look it up or Google it." And most of the time, I wouldn't even look up the thing that I went on my phone for. I'd open my phone, like that was my cue where I could open it. And then I'd go to social media instead. But it was like this justification in my brain for reaching for my phone and opening it. But then that wasn't even the task that I would do. I would get distracted and go on like TikTok and just like scroll and scroll. Um, So that's something I have to catch myself on now when I think to myself, like, oh, I'll just go look it up. I have to sit and think, like, do I really need that information? Like, is this life or death, me knowing, the exact time of the sunset today? No, like, I don't need to know that. Um, so it's funny, like, looking at those habits and realizing kind of like how addicted we are and the justifications that our brain gives for giving into that. Um, but I'm so happy I did that cleanse because it really opened my eyes to how much I'm constantly reaching for social media.
That is, yeah, super powerful, super impactful. And cheap dopamine is not a good thing for our brains. There's so many forms of it, whether it's junk food, social media, porn, like all these things, like hookup culture, that's actually cheap dopamine because it's all the reward without the effort. And that is actually a lot of studies are coming out now showing that this like accessible dopamine that's without any effort is leading to increased depression and anxiety because we're just blowing up our dopamine receptors and desensitizing our brain. So like dopamine cleansing can be so beneficial. Like, do you feel more like, or I guess let me ask open-ended, like what are the emotions you feel more profoundly after doing a cleanse?
I feel like all of them, honestly. I think social media is so numbing. Like, it's other people's thoughts, other people's opinions, other people's lives that we tune out all of the feelings and emotions of our own life. But we're getting hits of dopamine, like, oh, that looks exciting and fun, but it's not our own. Like, it's not our own experience or our own life that we are getting that hit from. And which feels so weird and like almost icky in a way when you think about it. Um, and so I think sitting with uncomfortable feelings is one thing that I would use my social media to distract from. It's like, oh, I feel kind of like bored or whatever, so I'm just going to scroll instead of trying to like fill that time with something else or just being still. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I came off of my Adderall recently, like several months ago, because it was having the same effect on me, like instant dopamine. You get this rush of dopamine and it feels like amazing, right? You are kind of like high on life and having a great time, getting a bunch of stuff done, and then you just crash. And if you don't take it the next day, it's like you're a shell of yourself. And I remember looking at that, and that was part of my um why I shifted to this like more mindful morning and stuff. But it really like sucks the other feelings out of you so you can't enjoy like the real parts of life. And it distracts you from just being yourself and enjoying life as yourself,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, how many videos do we see that are jokes about like people because they're on the internet, like the way they talk and the things they do, right? Like we follow micro trends in our day-to-day life with the words we say, the actions we do. It's scary. I mean, that hive mind is real. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be part of anyone's hive except my own. So I'm like,
It's
that is
so true. Like, I've noticed that on social media, it's the same, like the same tone, the same, in like where they change their voices around and
yeah.
stuff. It's like it really is the same, and it is a bit jarring.
It's and it's hard not to do it. I have a confession to make. I've realized when I'm having a conversation with someone, I don't do the question at the end of the words. But
Mhm.
when I'm filming, I struggle to not do it. And actually, this has helped a lot because it's like filming and a conversation. Like this
Yeah.
platform has really helped me learn how to speak on camera without sounding like a freaking idiot. But I've noticed that's a really bad habit, especially when I'm watching other beauty videos and wellness videos. I've become the like, vocal fry, like uptick in the end of the sentence. And I'm like, that's not me. That's not who I am off camera. And sometimes like who we are on social media can be so different than who we are in real life. And that's also scary because people feel like they know you and they don't. And it's one thing when that's angled, like if it's your business and you want to be private about aspects of your life, I resonate with that. But there's also a level of like this like false confidence, false personality, false persona on the internet. And then meanwhile, you're like this insecure shell of a being on the inside and not doing any work for that. So for someone like that who is struggling to be authentic in this world of social media, like what tips do you have for someone just to increase their authenticity within themselves and like what they put out in the world?
Honestly, I feel like this is something I have to give myself a pep talk about as well because it is so hard. Like, we're humans. We want to be a part of the pack. Like, we want to be welcomed in and seen as one, you know? And so when people are talking a certain way or talking about something, you wanna jump in, you wanna be seen as they're seen almost. And so I understand, like, why it happens, but at the same time, being yourself and authentic is so refreshing in this world, and I think the best advice is I know this sounds so cheesy, but it really is just coming back to embracing who you are, and I think that does take time and confidence, especially when you're putting yourself on social media where so many people can see you and you want them to perceive you in a certain way or to like you. But I really think that comes with knowing yourself, knowing your purpose, knowing, like, the confidence you have in yourself, and that takes time and work, honestly. I don't know if there's a quick fix to it except for just doing your best and trying to show up as who you are. But that's easier said than done.
Yeah. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. It's so hard to start. But you know what? And I know you probably see this, the more authentic you are, the more you draw in your tribe. People are not on a shallow sense, we're attracted to what's cool, what's trendy, whatever. But I've also learned like the less I try, the less fronts I put up, the more I'm just myself and all the good, bad, the ugly, the weird, like the nerdy, whatever, the more people are drawn to me. And
I
you meet your people.
I think that's so true. Like, after you saying that, it's when you do share something real, like it's so hard, obviously, because it's vulnerable. But when you share something real, there's so many people who come out of the woodwork and are like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so happy you said that. I'm so happy you shared that." And of course, there are going to be people who don't agree with you, and that's okay, as long as like what you're sharing isn't coming from a place of negativity or putting other people down.
Mhm.
Um, but I I really do agree with you on that. Once you start sharing, like, your truth, it is surprising how many people feel the same way or have wondered the same things, and you just pull the right people in to
Yeah.
you.
And people are drawn to passion. Like there's nothing embarrassing. I don't know why it can feel so vulnerable, embarrassing to be really passionate about something because like you're putting a piece of your heart on the table, right? And someone can accept it or reject it. Um, but people are drawn to that. Like people love to see passion. I've even had conversations where I like word vomit about biohacking or menstrual health, like whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. That was a lot. And people will be like, no, I love how passionate you are. And I'm like, really? Like that was a lot though. And people want to see passion. I think it's refreshing. I think it's different. Like to be vulnerable and to share your heart and to have something that like you really care about, like that is such a beautiful quality, and I want to be around people like that every day. Like I want my friends, my family, like my relationships to be like that because those are the relationships that will inspire you, not the ones where people like have no passion. So kind of with relationships, I know you've shared a little bit with me and a little bit on social media about how you've been shifting to make sure you're aligning with projects and collaborations and whatever that align with you as a person. So, what are some of your tips for clearing out things that are out of alignment and, you know, bringing in what is in alignment, whether it's business, relationships, etc.?
I think it's being really honest with yourself. Like there will be many things that come along, specifically in business, well, and also in relationships as well, that seem shiny, but aren't going to be helpful. Or you've been down that path before and it didn't work out for whatever reason. And just being really honest and not giving in to like the temptation of that shiny thing. So like for business, a lot of times, I have been burned more times than I would like to admit because I do it to myself. I say yes, yes, yes. I overcommit. I take on projects with clients that might not be the best fit just because, I want to be busy. I want to, it's when someone's offering to pay you money, it's hard to turn it down sometimes. But it's never worth it. Like honestly, when I've said yes to the things I've wanted to say no to, it has literally never been worth it. I'm miserable, I'm burned out, I'm exhausted. And last year, I feel like it was such a huge learning curve for me that I had to put my foot down and just be like, I can't do this to myself anymore. I need to trust myself that I'm going to call in the right people by showing up on social media as me and the things that are important to me and attracting the people who feel the same way and align with my values and who I am. And leaning into that trust is really scary because you do turn down opportunities and you turn down jobs and income. But in the long run, I think it just feels so much better. You're just so much happier and like confident in your work and in who you are and what you can provide. Um, but it's not easy.
Yeah, I feel like this can apply to so many things too, like business, friendships, dating. I mean, this idea,
Friendship,
like
yeah.
shiny thing, how many times have, all the people listening, like how many times have you either met a friend that just it felt like immediate chemistry as a friendship and you're like, "Yes," but then there's all these red flags and the way they treat you or like they're like secretly kind of a hater and you ignore it because you want it to work or you want a tribe or with dating like you meet someone you're so attracted to, you have all this chemistry but they're low effort. But you're like, but we have like, you got to tell yourself no sometimes to make room for what's great because all those things are distractions. All those things are going to prevent you from being great. And I think that, something that I see with you is like, I love that you're authentic and open about that journey. And like, you're authentic and open on social media about the burnout you face, about the shifts you need to take. It's not this like glossy, I mean, the aesthetic is on point, but it's not this glossy, like, look at me, it's booked and busy 2025. Like it's real. And I think that does ultimately attract the right people. So I want to respect your time. A couple more questions. Number one, before we close, like what are some little practical tips you have for people? So in the entrepreneurial space in general, or if they just have goals, like the goals can be health goals. I know friends who their goals are just to date this year, like whatever. What are some of your little tips for staying disciplined?
I think again, this comes back to having a bigger reason for why you're doing what you're doing. If you have a health goal and it's like, oh, because I want to look good in a swimsuit this summer or something, I feel like it's not enough. Like it has to be something bigger than that. It has to be like, I I want to take care, like my health is important to me and I'm committed to taking care of my body because of XYZ. Like I would really not just write down what the goal is, but the why. Like this is my goal because and like this is why it's important to me and like really think about it and reflect on why it is a goal for you and attach it to something bigger because I mean we all make those goals, just kind of willy-nilly and then a month later they kind of fall off the wagon a little bit. But the ones that we are really committed to are the ones that we feel really passionately about. And I think if you really want to achieve something, you have to attach that passion and care to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all about, oh, yeah, go ahead.
And also write it like you've already done it, and like write it
Mm.
every day in your journal. I have like 5 things that I write down every single day that I commit to and that I'm going to do, and write it like you've already done it.
I love that. It's claiming who you want to be, claiming it like you already are there.
Yeah,
Because you are there. Because if once again, if you're delusional to the point where you believe and you know, despite anything else, you know what you are, you're gonna be that in your actions, and that's how you become what you want to be. So it's like this
absolutely.
reverse psychology, little switch it up, but it's true. Like in order to be there, you have to be there. So, okay, any exciting upcoming projects or things that you can share with us just to look forward to for Drift?
I feel like I have a lot coming up in 2025.
Love
I'm
that.
I'm actually leaving tomorrow for Florida for a shoot. I'm really excited about multi-day shoot. I have some fun, like bigger brands that I'm contracted with this year, and I also am hoping to like get these events going more consistently and kind of build more of a creative community in Seattle. Um, but yeah, I'm just so excited. Oh, and I'm working on my documentary, which
Yes.
is a work in progress, but it's happening. So
That's amazing. Oh my gosh,
yeah.
that is I'm so excited. Well, I really hope you keep us all in touch about all those details because I know that once the documentary comes out, people are going to want to watch it, especially in this audience. What are your personal health goals right now?
Oh my gosh. Well, my goal for this year is to do intentional movement every day. So I have like a little ticker going and it's on my fridge and I just like take it off every day. Um, but honestly, it's to gain more muscle. I lost a lot of weight and like just wasn't on my health game for a lot of last year. And so it's like getting strong again, building that confidence in myself again. Um, and yeah, that intentional movement every day. And also just being doing my meditation practice every day as well, which is super important to me. And I can't imagine like letting that go at this point.
Yeah, beautiful. I love it. I love to see what you're working on and that you're finding that work-life balance, pursuing your dreams while also making sure that you pay your dues within your health. And that's so important for longevity, not in just in your body, but like in your dreams so that you don't burn out. So where can people find you on social media? Where can they work with you if they're interested? Can you plug all the ways that people can connect with you?
Yeah, so my Instagram, which is where I'm the most active, is driftcreative.co. Um, I'm on TikTok, but I mostly just like watch and scroll on TikTok, and I guess that's going away anyways. But yeah, Instagram is kind of the best place to find me, and we can chat and hang out.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I am feeling so inspired after chatting with you for this past hour, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was amazing. I love chatting with you. Um,
Likewise.
just such a great conversation.
Oh, thank you. Loved it. Well, you guys, if you loved this episode and if you're leaving feeling as inspired as I am today, please make sure you screenshot this, tag us on your stories, tag Drift, tag myself, and just help us get the message out there and grow this baby podcast in 2025. I hope you all have a beautiful day and we will chat soon.